a warm introduction. There are several benefits to not having arms. Any place you have to wear a wristband, I get in for free. I'll be taking advantage of that here in Vegas. And the police never pulled me over for using a handheld device, and they never handcuffed me. Whenever I walk on stage, I can't help but remember the very first time I was on stage at the age of 6 years old. You see, when I was growing up, I had a lot of insecurity about my difference. I was very self-conscious. I didn't like being stared at. But my mom really believed in me, and she had a very strong work ethic, and she believed that if you work hard, you can accomplish anything. And so during those younger years, during a time when I lacked self-confidence, my mom decided to put me into tap dance lessons. She thought it would help me get out of my shell. And so I began tap dance lessons at a local dance school. And after 9 months of practice, the dance teacher announced that we were going to have a recital in front of our family and friends. The moment I heard that, I thought to myself, I do not want to be a part of that. It's impossible. I get enough attention as it is. I don't want to be on stage with everyone staring at me. So I went home from dance practice that day, and I told my mom, I said, Mom, can you please tell my dance teacher that I don't want to be in the recital? And she said, sure, okay, I'll do that. And the next dance practice came, and she went up to Maxine, my dance teacher, and told her that I didn't want to be in the recital. But they convinced me to buy a dance costume anyway. So we bought the dance costume. It was a pink little tutu. And somehow, wearing that pink tutu, I found myself on stage days later, ready to go out. But under one condition. I said I would go out and perform only if I'm put in the back row. My dance teacher said there's not going to be a back row. There's not a back row for anyone. You're all going to be in one line. And you're going to stand out your star, and you're going to show off your stuff. You're going to perform for everyone. And I was so nervous. I was so scared. I looked back at Mom, and I said, Mom, I don't know if I can do this. And she said, you know what, Jessica? You can. You determine what's possible in your life. You can do this. And with some prodding and some encouragement, I gathered up all my courage and I walked out on stage and started to do my routine. My dance routine that I practiced for 9 months. But all I could do was look down at my tap shoes, shuffle, hop, step, and begin the routine. My eyes were glued to my feet. I was so scared, I was so nervous. And then the lights came on and that was bright and hot. With the music, it was all just too much. And then I heard the first round of applause, and my eyes started to lift. Another round of applause, and my eyes lifted higher. With each new round of applause, my eyes lifted higher and higher and higher. Until the music came to an end, I ran off stage into my mom's arms, and I said, Mom, when can I go back out and perform again? I have to thank my mom for helping me that day, because it prepared me for 14 years of dance recitals. And it's the only reason that I'm standing here with you today. To share with you this message that you are the one that determines what's possible in your life. Growing up with so much encouragement, such a wonderful family, I was so blessed. But then it came time to go to school, to go out in public. And I went to a public elementary school, and for the first time in my life, I was told that you can't do anything. You don't have arms. When the bell rang and everyone ran out on the playground for recess, all I wanted to do was climb up the slide like all the other kids. Because there in the center of the playground stood a 12-foot tall slide. And I had my method of climbing up the ladder. I'd use my chin and shoulder to hold on one step and use my feet to climb up the ladder. But in fear of me hurting myself, the playground playground monitor said, "You cannot go on the slide. You're going to fall back and hit your head." And boy, did that make me angry. It made me so angry, so frustrated, that all I could do was sit on the swings, close my eyes, and envision flying high above the playground. I was Superwoman. Unknowingly, that day, that planted the seed to one day become the world's first armless pilot. But be an example to every single person that you are the one who determines what's possible in your life. After planting that seed on the elementary school playground, I went on to school and graduated from the university, and shortly after that, I had the opportunity to do whatever I wanted to do, and I wanted to pursue my flying. And that was the journey to be the person I am today. It started the journey to become the first armless pilot. I showed up at the flight school. I convinced my flight instructor to take me on as a student after sending him a couple of text messages with my toes. He saw, well, if she can handle the text messaging, perhaps she could handle the controls of an airplane. He was convinced. And so I began my journey at that flight school, wondering how I would do everything that most student pilots take for granted. How would I put on my headset? Well, 2 broken headsets later, I found a heavy-duty set, and I realized that because there is limited space in this airplane, I had to do this with only 1 foot. If I use both feet to put on my headset, then I'm going to hit this knee on the wall of the airplane. So I had to learn how to do this with only 1 foot, using my chin and shoulder and pull it over my head like this. But that was only the first challenge. You see, the next thing I had to do is the first thing you do when you sit in a car or you sit in an airplane. The seatbelt. Now, for those of you who have never been in a small airplane, the seatbelt in a small airplane, in the pilot seat, the pilot and command seat, which is the left side of the airplane, it's called a 4-point harness. And the 4-point harness has a shoulder strap over the left shoulder, a shoulder strap over the right shoulder, and a lap belt that weaves through the 2 shoulder straps and buckles in place. Pretty complicated, right? So sitting in the cockpit of the airplane, sitting in the left seat, the pilot and command seat, I wondered, how would I buckle up this 4-point harness? And I looked down, caught a glimpse of my shoe. And my shoe was on the floor in the airplane, and I remembered being again on the elementary school playground, learning to tie my shoes. So I had 1 shoe in front of me when I was 6 years old, and I had it untied just like this. And I remember looking down at that shoe and wondering how I would do this, but I was committed to finding a way to tie my own shoelaces. You see, because everyone else in my kindergarten class had their foot inside the shoe. But the moment that my foot was inside the shoe, it would limit access to my toes. And I need my toes, because my toes are my fingers, my feet are my hands, and I need my toes, my feet to tie the laces. So unlike everyone else, including my teacher, I had both feet out of the shoe. And I watched as my teacher demonstrated to the whole class. Over, through, and pull to tighten. 1 bunny ear, over, through, and pull to tighten. But then I looked down at that shoe and I wondered, how am I going to get my foot back in? It's too tight. I have to untie those laces, make sure they're loose enough, and slip my foot in, and that's exactly what I did, and I was so proud of myself, but then I wondered, what about the other shoe? first. As you see, this shoe is already tied. Slip my feet in, and voila, I did it. I learned at the age of 6 years old not only how to tie my own shoelaces, but the importance of thinking outside the shoe. Thinking outside the shoe. That's how I'll solve this challenge of buckling my seatbelt. Going back to the cockpit of the airplane, I stood up in the left seat, the pilot command seat. I took the lap belt and I weaved it through that right shoulder strap. I weaved it through that left shoulder strap and I buckled it in place and I went over the left shoulder strap and loosened that, the right shoulder strap and loosened that, and loosened up that lap belt as loose as I possibly could and slid my body in the harness. Thank you. Pulling the strap over my left shoulder, I tightened up my right foot. Strap over the right shoulder, tighten up my left foot. Pulled my lap belt snugly in place. And 45 minutes later, my flight instructor got in, and he was impressed. He asked me, "How did you do it?" I told him I was thinking outside the shoe. Every single person can think outside the shoe. You see, too often we are limited. We are constrained to our shoes. And what do I mean by that? Well, shoe, S-H-O-E-S, self-imposed limitations. H, habits. O, overcomplication. And E, excuses. We limit ourselves by our shoes. We are constrained by our shoes. And how do we combat that? How do we open up our world of possibilities? Well, we think outside the shoe. Think. T-H-I-N-K. T, tear up the challenge. H, heighten awareness. There are so many resources around us that we can make use of. There are people around us that we can learn from. Heighten our awareness. Be aware of what's around us, what we can use. I remember the first time I climbed up on a horse, I thought it was going to be pretty easy. So I walked up to the horse and I thought maybe I'll just get on this horse, and I was struggling for about 15 minutes. I thought maybe if I got a running start, I could run and somehow jump on this horse. But that didn't work. Then I thought maybe I could bite down on the saddle and pull my body up. Well, I'm bottom heavy. That didn't work. Maybe someone could push me from behind, and so I had my mother-in-law push me from behind, but that didn't work either. I was sweating, wondering, how am I going to get up on this horse? And I stopped for a moment, and I heightened my awareness. I looked around, and just outside the arena stood a 3-foot-tall trailer. I brought the horse over to that 3-foot-tall trailer. I got up on that trailer, and within seconds, I was on that horse. Heighten awareness. Insist on finding a way. I stands for insist on finding a way. When I went to get my scuba diving certificate, there were a lot of questions about how I could scuba dive. And one of the questions was, how would I clear my goggles? Well, this is how I learned to clear my goggles. I used my toes, brought it up to my goggles, and I was able to blow air out of my goggles to clear them. And how would I equalize my ears? Well, I learned how to plug my nose just like this. How would I control my oxygen tank? Well, I controlled it like this. But then, once I had my flippers on, I began to limit myself. I realized that unlike every other scuba diver out there, I was going to have to do something different. I was going to have to find a way to do this differently. And so instead of having 2 flippers on my feet, one on my left foot and one on my right, I kept only 1 flipper or fin on my foot and kept the right foot free to do everything I needed to do while scuba diving. But now the challenge is, how do you propel through the water? Well, with 1 fin, 1 flipper, you can actually use both feet together and, like a dolphin, propel through the water just like this. No problem. It's just about finding a way. Insist on finding a way. N, non-stop reevaluation, repurposing, or reinventing. Non-stop reevaluation, repurposing, or reinventing. Non-stop repurposing is about, it's everything I do in my daily routine. For one, I don't know if you noticed, but here on my left ankle is an anklet. That has been repurposed now as a wedding anklet. Isn't that sweet? My right shoe has been repurposed as a wallet. And this is my secret against pickpocketers. I have my notes in here, I have a credit card in here, and whenever I make a purchase, I just grab that credit card out of my shoe, swipe it, and I'm able to make a purchase. Makes it easy on me. And right here is a very unique tool. This is a windshield repairman's tool. This was originally intended for removing cracked or broken windshields. You suction this on the windshield and you're able to remove the windshield. If you watch a repairman, he does that. But for me, this is the only reason that I have pants on today. This is my dressing tool. This windshield repairman's tool has been repurposed as a dressing tool. I suction this on the wall at the hotel room, wherever I'm staying, and I'm able to suction this on the wall, hang my pants on the hook, step into my pants, and wiggle my way in. And reinventing. There have been a lot of times in my life that I've had to give myself time to reinvent. I actually have something up here that has been invented for my purposes of pushing a shopping cart. This is a belt. The question of how I would push a shopping cart when I lived on my own came up, and we decided to use a belt, fasten this hook on it, so that I essentially attach myself to the shopping cart, and I'm able to push the shopping cart around the store. It's been reinvented for me. A new way of pushing a shopping cart. Or when it came to Taekwondo, I started Taekwondo when I was 10 years old. And Taekwondo, if you don't know what it means hand, foot, art. Taekwondo. And the question about how would I participate in Taekwondo if I don't have the arms? How would I do the punches? How would I do the arm blocks? Well, when I started Taekwondo, my instructor said that I could join the class under one condition, that I had a good attitude. And that wasn't a problem for me. So I started Taekwondo, and with the help of many people in class, some help from instructors, there was a lot of people who were involved. We created a whole new curriculum for someone practicing Taekwondo without the use of their arms. So that for every punch, I did a knee strike. For every knife hand strike, I would do a side kick. For every hand movement and block was substituted with some form of kick or movement, so that I could participate from white belt all the way through black belt in every single form. And now, at the end of this month, I'll be coming right back here to Las Vegas at the convention center next door to test for my 4th degree black belt in Taekwondo. If you have to reinvent a new way, don't be afraid to do so. We don't always have to do things the way everyone else does it. And K, kick out the habit of excuses. We live our lives ruled by our excuses. But if we kick out that habit, there are so many more possibilities. We'll stop wasting our time coming up with a good excuse. Kick out the habit of excuses. Think outside the shoe. If you have the desire to do something, you are so close to reaching your goal. Do you know that desire is 80% of success? Just by merely wanting to accomplish something, we are that close to reaching our goal. Andrew Monk once said, "A shot glass of desire is greater than a pitcher of talent." We can have all the talent in the world, but if we don't have the desire, we are not working with much. What's something you want to accomplish? What's standing in the way? Because if you want to accomplish it, you are so close to reaching your goal. I remember learning the importance of desire when I moved out of my parents' house in college. I was excited about the independence. I found a little apartment across from the university where I attended for 4 years. And in this little apartment, we had everything we needed. It was my roommates, Jo Beth and Charlene. And the only challenge is that we didn't have a television in our living room. Well, you don't really watch TV in college. But once in a while, we wanted to take a break. So I needed to find a TV. We were broke college students. We didn't have money to buy a TV. So I called up my mom. I said, Mom, can I please borrow one of the TVs just until my roommates and I can afford to get one? She said, sure. Just go home, check in with Dad, make sure it's all right. And I went home to Dad. My dad's retired, so the TV means a lot more to him. And I looked up at Dad and I said, Dad, could I please borrow one of the TVs just until my roommates and I can afford to get one? And he looked me straight in the eyes and he said, I don't know about that. In his words, that meant no. So my next challenge was trying to figure out how to move a 22-inch tube television out of my parents' house without anyone's help, and most importantly, without my dad knowing. At about 6:30 in the evening, my dad waters plants in the front yard. This would give me a 30-minute window to try and accomplish this task. To many, it might seem impossible to move a TV without your arms. Well, impossible actually means I'm possible. And as I saw my dad leave the house, he shut the front door, and I knew I had 30 minutes. So I ran over to that TV stand. I unplugged all the cords with my right foot. I thought to myself, maybe I can push this TV off the stand, but I'd run the risk of breaking the TV. So I needed something to help me. Something with wheels. I heard someone say it. Something with wheels to help me transport this TV. And I looked around the house, and there out on the back patio was my brother's skateboard, but it was too low to the ground. In the other room of the house was my dad's dolly, again, too low to the ground. But there in the home office was a computer chair with wheels. This would be the perfect tool for the crime. I remember grabbing that chair from underneath the computer desk, pushing it with my feet like this. Let's pretend this is the chair. I managed to get that chair all the way up against the TV stand, just like this. Then I went behind the TV stand and I pushed the TV off about 30% of the way. I came around front and I hugged that 22-inch tube television, and I managed to get it from that stand onto this computer chair with wheels, only to realize the TV was bigger than the chair. If I stood back, it would come crashing down. So I stayed hovered over this TV, using my chin to hold in place, my feet to push the wheels. Finally, I got it through one room, the next, down one step. I was lucky it didn't fall off. Finally, that last room, all the way through the doorway. All I needed to do now was hit the garage door button. I was sweating bullets. I reached my left foot up there. I had to stay in contact with the TV, otherwise it would fall down. So I used my chin to hold it in place, reached my left foot up there, practically doing the splits, hit the garage door button, and as the door opened, guess who was standing right beside my car? My dad took one look at me. He saw the sweat pouring down my face, the strain, the conviction, but most importantly, desire in my eyes. And he said, honey, if I would have known you wanted that bad, I could have helped you. I drove it home to my roommates, and my roommates, they asked me, how did you do it? I told them I learned the importance of desire. Walls are only there to stop the people who don't want it badly enough. If there's something you want to achieve, don't let anything stop you. And be persistent. Never give up. When was the last time in your life you thought of the words, I can't? It's an excuse for giving up. When we use those words, we set ourselves up for failure. But if we say we can or we'll try, there's a lot more room for possibility. You see, what we say becomes what we believe. And with persistence, we can do anything. I actually love a quote by Franklin Roosevelt, who says, when you come to the end of the rope, tie a knot and hang on. Never give up. It's so easy to come up with an excuse for giving up. But I challenge you to be persistent. And I went to get my driver's license like any teenager, and it was truly a test of persistence. Because I showed up at the motor vehicle division, I filled out all the paperwork with my right foot, I passed it over to the woman behind the counter, and she said, okay, have a seat, we'll call you up when we're ready for you. About 2 hours later, they finally called me up, which is usually the case at the motor vehicle division. It's a long wait. And they called me up and said, Jessica, are you ready to take your driving exam? I said, yes, I've been sitting here, I'm so ready. Truly, I was a little nervous. I was excited at the same time, and I practiced all my parallel parking. But I was ready for the test. And they said, head outside, sit in the driver's seat, we'll send out the examiner to meet you. So I sat there in the driver's seat, had my foot up here on the wheel, and out came the examiner with a clipboard in his hand. He sat in the passenger seat, and I could tell he was nervous. I remember looking over at him and I asked him, have you ever given a test to anyone driving with their feet before? And he looked up at me and he admitted, no, I can't say that I have. There was a long, awkward silence. I looked over, I saw a sweat drop rolling off his forehead. So I turned to him and said, well, you might want to buckle up then. He buckled up. And 20 minutes later, we pulled back into the parking lot and I had a driver's license in my right foot. But only 1 week later, I received a letter in the mail that said my license had been suspended. What did I do? I didn't run any red lights. I wasn't speeding, not doing anything illegal. So I went back into the motor vehicle division, and a person unrelated to the motor vehicle division reported me in saying it's very unsafe that this woman is allowed to drive a car without any special modifications, without a special vehicle. And so in order for you to get your driver's license back, you're going to have your car modified with special equipment. And it sure made me angry and frustrated, but I wanted my license back. So a month later, I went back into a different motor vehicle division. I had my car modified, and with a different examiner this time, he saw that I could drive just fine with those modifications. And then I turned to him and asked, well, would it be okay if I showed you how I could drive without them? He said, okay. And he saw that I drove better without the need for special modifications. Thank you. Fortunately, my license was reinstated. And now with an unrestricted driver's license, I take every opportunity I can to rent a car from a car rental agency. Those are the best reactions. But sometimes persistence means going beyond the expectations of other people. There will be plenty of people in our lives who will doubt what we can achieve. There will be plenty of people in our lives who will tell you, you can't. You can't do it. But we have to be persistent. And when I went to get my pilot's certificate, I shared with you all my first day of flight training, but it wasn't until 3 airplanes, not because I wrecked them, 3 different flight instructors, flight training in Florida, California, then back in Arizona, multiple hours later, until that day when my instructor finally turned to me and said, "You can take over this airplane now." And it was the most incredible moment when he did that. He signed my logbook, he passed it on to me, I put it in the panel, the side panel of the airplane, and I began to taxi out. But he said, "I have one last piece of instruction for you. Do not take off unless you can hear me on the radio, unless we can stay in communication." And so I hit the push-to-talk switch, which is a little switch on the yoke of the airplane. I hit that with my big toe, and I tested it out. I could hear him loud and clear. He could hear me loud and clear. And he said, "Okay, now you can take off." And it was the most incredible moment. A moment I'd waited for my entire life. I was the only one in that airplane. And as I took off, it was the greatest feeling of freedom, empowerment, and independence. As I climbed up at altitude, I looked down below and I saw the playground. I'd accomplished my childhood dream of flying over the playground. And as I was wiping tears away from my eyes with my right foot, it was difficult while flying the plane at the same time. But then I turned my first crosswind turn, which is the first turn in the pattern, and all of a sudden, I heard static. And I thought, oh no, don't tell me, something's wrong with my radio, something's wrong with the communication. I need to stay in communication with my instructor. After all, that's the one thing he asked of me. Sure enough, I tested out the push-to-talk switch. I was trying to communicate. Something was wrong. I could not communicate with my instructor. I began to panic. I began to stress out. Began to wonder what's going on. And I stopped myself. And I realized if I continue down this road, I could lose complete control of this airplane, spiral to the ground, and die. Or I can do exactly what my instructor taught me. He said, fly the airplane first, everything else is second. And I snapped out of my panic mode, took control of that yoke, and that airplane. I stood up, sat up really tall, and I flew that airplane in and landed ever so beautifully. As I climbed out of that airplane, I not only climbed out of a 1945 unmodified 415-seat air-coupe airplane. Thank you. But I climbed out of that airplane as pilot in command of my own life. I want to ask each and every single one of you, are you your pilot in command? Because life is 10% what happens to us and 90% of how we respond to it. With desire, with persistence, we must also be fearless. Think for a moment in your life when you were scared. Think for a moment in your life when you were terrified or something you've always been afraid of. Fear, F-E-A-R, stands for false evidence appearing real. We create our own fear. And if we create our own fear, we can also destroy our own fear. I love the quote, identify your greatest fear and walk directly at it. And I always say, never let fear stand in the way of any opportunity, because we can either F-E-A-R, forget everything and run, or we can face everything and rise. The fear research has shown that if we face our fear, the more we face our fear, it relaxes the fear circuitry in our brain. It makes it easier. So I challenge you to be fearless. And sometimes fears are deeper than the fear of heights or the fear of spiders. Sometimes it's deeper, like the fear of failure or the fear of rejection. You see, I dealt with the fear of rejection for many years. I used to wear fake arms to school every single day for 11 years. Now, I have nothing against prosthetics. It's wonderful what they've been able to do for so many people who've lost limbs due to trauma or disease. But for me, fake arms didn't really connect. You see, I use my feet and my toes better than I use those prosthetics. But when I had the prosthetic fake arms on underneath a sweatshirt or a jacket, I looked like everyone else. I could go through the school cafeteria and no one would pick on me. I could go get my books out of the locker and no one would stare. It made it so easy to be just like everyone else. Has there ever been a moment in your life where you wanted to be just like everyone else? We all have been there, especially during adolescence. But after 11 years of wearing those 10-pound plaster-made fake arms to school every single day, I finally decided to leave them behind. And I walked to the first day of 8th grade without them. Somehow I felt lighter, freer, more empowered than I'd ever felt before. I was finally going to be me, the person God created me to be. And when I walked on the bus, I knew people were going to make fun of me. But I remembered hearing this quote, "No one can make you feel inferior without your permission." As those bus doors shut behind me, I promised myself I would never again wear them. To this day, they remain in the closet. I'm going to ask each and every one of you, what in your own life are your own fake arms? What's holding you back from